Alright, I've now played the Concord Beta for almost 20 hours, and I've got some thoughts to share. But before we get to that, I want to establish how I felt about the game before playing it. Like most people, I wasn't all that impressed with the reveal of Concord on first viewing. However, I'm always trying to challenge my own assumptions, and so I went back and rewatched it with a more open mind shortly after the reveal. And some of the things I noticed that second time around honestly did make me pretty excited. If nothing else, it clearly showed a lot of potential in a genre that's been growing stale for years. So when the online discourse surrounding Concord almost immediately and predictably grew toxic, I chose to ignore the detractors and trust my gut. Now with that out of the way, let's jump right into it. Concord is exactly what it looks like, a 5v5 arena-based hero shooter in the same vein as Overwatch, but with a greater emphasis on the shooting. A point I've heard thrown around a lot both leading up to and during the Concord beta is that there are already a ton of hero shooters, so why should you play this one? First, let's get something straight. As far as well-known games similar to Concord, there's pretty much only Overwatch and to a lesser extent Paladins, also known as We Have Overwatch at Home. Sure, there are other hero shooters like Apex Legends and Valorant, but those are each incredibly different games that appeal to incredibly different audiences. So then we basically have Overwatch, Overwatch plus Counter-Strike, and Overwatch plus Warzone. But the real kicker is that Overwatch, the base game which the rest of these draw inspiration from, has been one of the most mismanaged clusterfucks in video game history. It's been a stale and mediocre game for well over half its life, and even a so-called sequel couldn't inject any meaningful improvements to the original design. It's also remained relatively popular for many years in spite of its many flaws because there simply hasn't been a particularly well-made alternative. That is, until now. If you want to know why you should play Concord instead of something like Overwatch, it's really quite straightforward. Concord is simply the better game. It looks better, it sounds better, and most importantly, it feels so much better to play. Not to downplay what an achievement this is, but it's frankly absurd that it's taken this long for a game to come around and replace the notoriously mediocre experience that Overwatch has become over the years. So then, let's get on to why I believe Concord is already setting itself up to take over the hero shooter genre. Let's start with what I'd argue is the most important part of this game, the free gunners. These games live and die by the quality of their character designs, and not just in terms of gameplay. The overall style and personalities of these characters are what players, fans, and artists of all kinds will gravitate towards first and foremost. Fortunately, Concord absolutely knocks this out of the park, unless you're an incel whose new favorite phrase is DEI. While I admittedly and begrudgingly understand the early comparisons to the Guardians of the Galaxy, now having seen the full 18 character roster and played several of them, I can confidently say they're all wonderful and incredibly unique. The game opens with a short vignette of several characters making plans following their qualifying as free gunners, and I personally found it a nice little bit of characterization. If what the developers have said about having something like this once every other week or so rings true and they can deliver, then I look forward to seeing where this story and its characters go. I've said it before, but this is the kind of thing that Overwatch was always missing. It had a roster of incredible characters and gave hardly any opportunities to see them interact outside of NPC chatter during gameplay. And speaking of gameplay, that brings me to the next thing I would like to talk about, the combat. The various weapons unique to each character feel absolutely incredible to use. Whether unloading huge chunky rounds from Starchild's shotgun, sending Roka's rockets zipping across the field, or firing Haymar's explosive sling straight into an enemy's head, every single shot in this game feels great in a way that most FPS games can only dream of. While there are a variety of truly unique options, at the end of the day, it feels like every character has weapons and tools that make dealing with enemies on their own just as viable as with a group. I've 1v1'd the tankiest characters as the squishiest, and vice versa. Every single character is more than capable of dealing with any other character in the game if played well. Overwatch has never at any point in its life ever felt even remotely as well balanced or satisfying to play as what I just described. While I'm sure there will be balance changes needed as people unravel the meta following launch, so far the game just feels incredibly fair regardless of who I chose to play. A big way that they've cleverly kept the focus on combat engagements and the back and forth gunfighting is by opting not to have super abilities. Without the ability to kill an entire team with the press of a single button and other similarly hard to balance effects, Concord really manages to make it feel like a battle between equally well-equipped mercenaries with their own strengths and weaknesses. While there are tanks and supports, that's somewhat inaccurate as they are just as deadly as their more DPS-focused counterparts. Their roles just describe what their abilities are best at accomplishing in a team setting. And speaking of abilities, they likewise feel great to use and make perfect sense in terms of how they're meant to inform each character's unique playstyle. While Kip's may feel a bit weak given her gun does very little damage, her design encourages having multiple short engagements and picking off targets carefully. On the flip side, one-off can survive and deal huge amounts of damage, but he has to get to the action and stay there lest he get picked off by someone on the way. Even a character like Roka, who would at first appear to function like Pharah, is substantially more technical and aggressive than her Overwatch counterpart. And even if these characters didn't really have any original abilities or weapons, they do though, they'd still be more fun to play by virtue of offering a far more refined and satisfying shooting experience across the board. The last thing I'd like to talk about is how they balance character switching in regards to competitive and objective-based game modes. Unlike the clusterfuck that is Overwatch's awful role queue, competitive and presumably ranked matches in Concord work on a first to 4 round based system wherein you only have 1 life per round. And you can only win 3 rounds with a single character before having to switch. The way this works is via the really innovative crew system. You essentially build a loadout of playable characters that you have access to when picking your character at the start of a round. That loadout can have a total of 12 characters on it, but no more than 3 of the same character. So the gist is that you have to be prepared at the very least to have 2 characters you're comfortable with if you hope to win a competitive match. Furthermore, you're granted different buffs each round based on the role of each character you've played that match. So if I play an anchor like One-Off, next round I'll have slightly more health on whoever I play. If I choose an assassin or haunt like Roka for round 2, then for round 3 I'll have both the bonus health from playing an anchor and the bonus movement speed from playing an assassin. While it may sound a little bit confusing, it quickly starts to make sense after messing with it for yourself. I really think that this is the unsung hero of Concord's design, to be honest. I've said for a long time that Overwatch can never properly be balanced because the nature of free-swapping characters mid-match makes developing a healthy meta and counter-meta almost completely impossible. While I like the more straightforward method of simply locking in a character before the match, I actually think that this crew system that Firewalk have cooked up for Concord may just be the solution to character swapping which the genre has desperately needed. And that just about covers all I've got to say about Concord after having spent time with the beta. I'll certainly have a larger video and a lot more to say when the full game releases at the end of August, but for now I think I've gone over the important things. While this was just a beta and things are subject to change, I am confident in saying that, as usual, I was right. Concord is hands down the best hero shooter I've ever played and will undoubtedly be the best one on the market when it drops in just over a month. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to check out my others, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and ding the little bell if you want to be notified when my next one goes live. I also stream 5 days a week starting at 12 PM Pacific Standard Time, both here on YouTube and on Twitch, so stop by if you want to talk games or just see what I'm currently playing. Links to my Twitch channel and Discord down below. Thanks again, and see you next time.